These are unavailable this morning, so I'm going to chair the meeting. So we'll call the meeting to order at 9:31. You'll have the agenda before you. I would take a motion in a second on the agenda unless there's something anybody wants to add or change on the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda, Huesman.
Thank you.
Sturms, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not. Well, is there anyone who does not vote to approve the agenda? Okay. We'll consider that motion approved. Approval of the minutes. Hope you had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Not, I'd take a motion.
Sturms, I'll move approval.
Second, Rudy Caster.
Thank you. Again, we'll go with, is there anyone not in favor of approval of the motion? Motion passes. Thank you. We were planning on having a presentation on low salt roadway design, but due to some circumstances, we're going to postpone that. So we'll move on to item number 5, which is a report and vote on the Unified Planning Work Program and draft budget. Dylan.
Thank you. As you're aware, we've been working on our next fiscal year's work program and budget. This outlines all the work activities that the MPO staff will be doing, but also all the planning activities that require federal funding too, even if it's not through the MPO. So a lot of DART projects are in there as well. We've solicited projects from the tech committee as well as the policy committee. We have received a few of those. I would note, though, that if you do have others that didn't make it into the draft plan, please let us know. We can still get those in before the final version is due. This month, we're asking for approval of the draft plan. That will go to the Iowa DOT for them to review, provide comments, and this will come back to you in May in a final version that needs to be approved before the June 1st deadline to the DOT. The MPO is required to produce a certain documents such as the work program, the long range transportation plan, the TIP, and so forth. There's some additional requirements that we also have, such as the congestion management process, administering SDBG funds, and so forth. All of those projects are included in the work program because they're required, and there's also a number of projects that and planning efforts that help support these efforts as well. So that's what you'll see in there. Listed up here on the screen, if you haven't had a chance to read through the document, I've identified the new or notable projects that we'll be working on in the next fiscal year. The long-range transportation plan update will be a big effort. That plan is due in November of 24, so in fiscal year 25, but the bulk of the work will happen in fiscal year 24. Included as priorities for next fiscal year will be the travel demand model update, developing the growth scenario, and adjusting our planning area boundaries based on new census information, but also just based on the growth that we've seen since the last plan update. If you also didn't hear, we received a $800,000 grant at the MPO for the Safe Streets for All program. This will allow us to produce a comprehensive safety action plan. And by having that action plan, all the communities and the MPO will be available or will be eligible for further implementation dollars through that same federal program. So that's something that we'll be getting underway in the next fiscal year as well. The goods movement study update is something that we received from the city of Des Moines, and we received that a couple of years ago. It dropped off, and now we brought it back on here. We were waiting until the transload facility was complete and also just getting our model updated and so forth. So with those things underway or completed, we'll now be able to update that goods movement study. Not necessarily listed as a project yet, but included in the budget side of things is that the MPO will be a host site for Green Iowa AmeriCorps. This will allow us to have a couple of AmeriCorps volunteers or members here basically in our office working out of it, but able to help the MPO with some of its efforts as well as help the communities with a lot of sustainability related efforts. If you have questions about any of that, please reach out to Allison Van Pelt on our staff. Also speaking of Allison, she's going to continue working on a lot of the greenhouse gas analysis that's been going on over the last year. So far, that's been pretty community, citywide and regional analysis that's been done, but we'll start drilling down into more corridor level and other smaller areas than just the community level in the next fiscal year too. And then finally, with the infrastructure bill that passed a couple of years ago, there's a new carbon reduction strategy. And that carbon reduction strategy is something that we will receive additional funding for, such as similar to the SDBG process that we will allocate out to the communities. But there's also just some of the, what do we want our strategy to be to reduce carbon that we have to work with the state on. And so both of those things will be being developed over the next fiscal year as well. Like I said, the next steps here is approve this draft today. This will go before the executive committee next week too. Once that's done, it'll go to the DOT. We'll get their comments and there'll probably be some revisions. So if you have other things you want to see in here, please let us know. Otherwise, we're asking today just to approve the draft and we'll come back in May with a final version for you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Yeah, John.
Yeah, Dylan, I've got several questions. One on the Safe Streets for All action plan. I noted that there's no staff hours that's being assigned to this.
Yeah, we intend to hire that out as to a contract with the consulting team. So MPO staff will have some hours in it, but that'll be covered just through our normal, our other work that is related to safety in our, in work element 1.0 in the work program. We're going to try to push as much of that $800,000 out to the consulting teams as possible.
Okay. And then you mentioned the 800,000. The other question is the 200,000 that is, I believe, designated for the larger central, Transportation Planning Alliance. Does that need to be identified in this narrative here?
We should probably mention it that it'll be a coordinated effort, although our intent is that those will be two separate plans that happen. So there'll be two separate RFP processes, two separate consulting teams. Their SERPA's portion of that, the 200,000, that'll go into their work program and budget. So we don't have to include it here, but we should mention that it'll be a complementary effort, similar to how we mentioned that it'll be complementary to the work that Des Moines already been doing too.
Have you got a sense yet from USDOT when you will actually the funds will be obligated and you'll be able to engage a consultant? Yeah,
Zach, do you want to jump in on this too? He's been more involved, but we've heard that because there's so many awards, it might take a while, several months potentially. That's the latest we've heard, unless you've heard something more recently.
Yeah, I participated in a webinar yesterday and we got a little bit more additional information on that. It sounds like they're going to be doing another kickoff webinar, I believe next week or the week after. And following that, they'll start working with the grantees. And they've indicated that they think that the planning award grants, and it kind of depends on how much you're awarded, but they're anticipating that it will take about 45 days roughly to get a grant agreement with the planning grants. So we're anticipating that possibly within the next few months, we would be able to engage a consultant and start moving forward on the project.
All right, so you're thinking you'll be somewhere in June-ish?
Probably.
Yeah, most likely.
Because we have to, send an RFP out and go through the consultant selection process and get the grant agreement assigned. I think ideally what we would like to do is kind of do some of those things concurrently. We need to have some conversations with our Federal Highway Division contacts to make sure that we can, for example, send out the RFP as we're developing the grant agreement. But our hope would be to do those concurrently just to save some time.
Yeah, because I think that from a timeline, if you're looking at a fourth quarter completion, that likely will make it really tight for anybody to get into the implementation grant cycle next year. If DOT does the same April-ish
right
NOFO.
Yeah, we have the same concern. We'd like to have this complete so communities could go after that implementation funding. So we're trying to, as Zach said, get these moving forward and see if Federal Highway will allow us to move our process along as we're getting the grant agreement pulled together.
Okay.
I think on the positive side, they noted that, most of the grants that were given out this past round were planning grants. I think it was 437 of them. And they said they awarded almost every planning grant that was submitted. That means that everybody's kind of in the same boat as far as, nobody's really probably going to be able to get a plan done in time, certainly not for this year's funding, and next year's funding will even be pushing it. And I think their intention is to roll a lot of that funding over into the next years of awards. So I think we'll still have a fair amount of funding to go after once our plan is finished.
All right, all right. I had two other items. Thank you for the answers on the safe speech for all grant. The other was on the goods movement study. I appreciate it continuing on. One element that I would very much like to see is a recommendations for either future truck routes that would involve maybe enhanced infrastructure or improved infrastructure on routes, but also what we should maybe designate or change and have as a truck route that we don't have today. And I'm speaking of the metro area, as well as what truck routes maybe need to be removed or retired. Because I think there's been enough growth in the area, changes in the distribution centers. The transload facility, I think, is a very good example, although it was primarily, I think, cited to take advantage of the existing truck routes or the future truck routes. But some of the distribution centers we're seeing in just to the north of the city of Des Moines, in the unincorporated areas of Polk County, we really need to look at that from as part of this plan, and I hope that's included in there.
Yeah, those are good points, and we'll be reaching out probably to you, John, and if anybody else has suggestions like that too, and refine that scope a little bit more, so that when we get into that work, we're providing what the committee's looking for.
And if there's anything that we can help with from my staff, please let me know. Then the final thing that caught my eye was the EV charging station integration. And I guess the one thing that I would suggest is that this effort be more of a strategic nature to identify where we should locate potentially charging stations throughout the metro area, so that we can see the deployment of or match the deployment and engagement of EV equipped vehicles that will be coming in the market over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. We'll get that updated.
And that's all my comments.
Any other questions or comments?
All right. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, John, for the comments too. So this is a voting item, so we have a motion and a second.
David Carroll, so moved. Warren County.
Caster with Waukee, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? All right, thank you. Motion passes. Report on the fiscal year 2024 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program Development, Zach.
Yes, just want to give you an update on the development of the upcoming TIP. This document incorporates all the federally funded projects that are going to be moving forward in the next 4 years. We typically send out reports and ask community members to update their projects in the TIP. We're getting ready to kick that process off. Any project changes as far as descriptions or funding amounts, when the project is going to be programmed, we want to make sure that it give each community an opportunity to review their projects and make any changes of that nature. Any project that is not going to be federally authorized by September 30th will have to roll into the next fiscal year. So just keep an eye out for those kind of projects when you're reviewing the list that we send out to you. We're planning on sending that list out on March 10th or shortly after March 10th. The funding subcommittee is meeting on the 9th to develop their award recommendation. So the list that we send out will include the tentative award recommendation from the funding subcommittee. I will note that that could potentially change. Once it goes to the board, they can make adjustments to it, but we will send that out as a tentative. If you are recommended to receive funding in 2027, we will include that project on there tentatively. We'll then ask that you return those status reports by the end of the month, so March 31st. But we'll send those out once that meeting wraps up on the 9th. If you have any questions about the TIP development, I'd be happy to take them. This is just before you for your information.
Any questions for Zach? All right. They didn't have a number on it, a little formatting issue there, but Dylan, report on DC list and community projects.
Thank you. We've got a couple of related items here that we'll cover. The first one is the annual DC trip list for the partnerships trip, which is in May. We're working with our member communities to develop a list like we typically do. We usually do this in the fall. We delayed it until after we knew what Congress was going to be doing with earmarks, which kind of, for community funded projects, which kind of gets to the next item. But anyway, we're asking that you please submit materials to us by March 17th if you have a project that is actively seeking federal funding. So whether that's a community funded project earmark request, a raise grant, something like that, please let us know. And kind of related to that then is notification that Representative Nunn's office is seeking projects for their community project funding program. The information is up there on the screen of how to submit those projects. If you go to their website, there's more information there. The deadline to submit that, though, is coming up. It's March 7th. So please, reach out to us if you have any questions, if you need letters of support, anything along those lines. But we wanted to make sure you're aware of that date and this process. If you do submit a project, please let us know so we can make sure to include that on the DC trip list, and that we also just have that information in case we're contacted by the congressional offices for additional information. I think that's all we have, but if there's any questions, please let us know.
All right. On to upcoming events.
And for upcoming events, typical the events are listed in the agenda packet. A couple of ones that we have coming up. There's an EV, well, we hosted it yesterday, an EV webinar. The recording is available though. There's also some upcoming events on there of the screen that might be of interest as they relate to transportation or climate issues. Again, if there's any questions about these or any others that you want to share, please let us know.
Thanks, Dylan. Any other non-action items of interest for the committee? If not, our next meeting is April 6th, same time and station. Appreciate everybody's attendance this morning. We're adjourned.